So back in batch, let's take a look at the improvements that we've added to a few nodes. And the first one is RGB blur. So if you're looking for RGB blur in the extension, you won't find it because it has become blur. The RGB was removed. And the main reason is, well, now as one of the upgrades that we've added is we've actually finally allowed it to work in YUV space and actually generate a chroma blur or luma blur. So this is something that really should have been there from the beginning, but we're introducing here in the extension. So anyway, away with the RGB blur, it's now just blur. The other thing that we're introducing here is the ability for you to actually also blend your blur effects. And so you have access to all the various blending modes here in the pop-up that will actually combine your blurred image over the original input image. So that's kind of cool and also makes the blur tool a lot more creative than it was before. We're introducing also a new algorithm which we call radial stamp. And radial stamp is really a super fast radial blur. And it doesn't quite deliver the same results as the former radial blur, so we left both. But it's a very interactive radial blur effect, as you can see here. And the interesting thing is that both in the radial mode and in the radial stamp mode, you now have access to the stabilizer if you wanted to track the center of the radial blur. The radial stamp also provides you control over the number of samples that you actually want to use. Lowering the number of samples actually has a direct impact on the performance, but it also triggers interesting capabilities, more, I guess, from a graphic perspective or an artistic perspective, that you should certainly try to play with. I'm just going to give you an example here where I just drew like this little pane thing in batch and pipe this into a blur node and switch to radial stamp. And here I have an amount set to 45 and I introduced rotation, okay? And as I move my center around, you see that it then creates very intriguing patterns that can be very interesting for backgrounds, graphic backgrounds, all sorts of things. So I certainly encourage you to play with this thing and play with the sample values. So by default, it's set to 250, which will provide an actual radial blur effect, as you see. But it's up to you to play with that, and it can actually be even animated over time. So it's something that you can use to your advantage. If I'm back into the blur nodes, we upgraded the directional blur. So now it's actually a very fast, interactive, GPU accelerated algorithm that we're using that essentially delivers pretty much the same results as the old algorithm. So we simply replaced one with the other. So this is a lot faster, very interactive. And as you see, I can just switch things, move things around. It's very responsive. And it also offers what you would call a bias control, which simply allows you to determine what should be the center of your blur. So if I set the bias to 0, for example, it's like the blur grows in both directions along the object. And if I set it to -1, it will look as if it's kind of growing out of the object. So yeah, pretty much have the control over the way that you want your how you want your blur to originate from the image. So it's kind of like a really nice improvement. I do want to stress the fact that also, regardless of which blur methodology you're using, not only can you combine it also with the blend modes, but you also have the ability, for example, to fix per component weights. So if you want to have more blur in the red component, in the green component, you can pretty much tailor this to your needs. And you can also create spatial offsets, much like you could do in the glow node. This is so in combination with the various blend modes, it can actually deliver really intriguing looks, and it becomes pretty much a very creative tool. And of course, all of these functionalities are both available whether you work in YUV color space, Chroma Luma, or RGB color space. Last but not least, we're also introducing a defocus blur. I'm just going to reset stuff here. And the point of the defocus blur is kind of simulate more of an optical blur. And so if you start playing with this, let me switch to blend here, so just that you can see what happens. It will actually generate patterns that you can actually control here from this interface. And to better see the effect of this, I'm just going to drag in here defocus applied to an HDR image. And as you see, as I actually increase the blur values, it actually generates, with every highlight that it's detecting inside of the image, it's actually generating pattern that I designed here. So I have full control over the number of sides. I have control also. I have access to two types of patterns. One that actually allows you also to actually control the roundness of the pattern, and of course the curve that actually allows you to control the distribution of gray levels within the pattern. So it's a very flexible tool, and I think it's a nice addition to the blur tool. Just want to mention that blur is available in flare, flame, flint, and smoke. And as I said, inside of smoke, it's actually available through as a module also from the Edit Desk. This is more specific to flame, but the 3D blur got also upgraded with the addition of actually a super fast Gaussian mode that's accessible here in the blur type pop-up. And so this is an extremely interactive blur, which kind of, I guess, solves some of the problems that people were complaining in terms of performance, that if they had high values of blurring, it would essentially really get the system to lag and drop in performance. Gaussian blur is actually super fast. And as you see, it provides you with a very interactive experience as you're dealing with Z blurring. The defocus algorithm was also retrofitted inside of 3D blur, so you have a lot more options now to deal with your depth of field simulations. Again, this is a tool that's only available inside of Flame and Flare at this point. So it's time for me to move on to the very significant upgrade to the Glow node. Previously available in Flame, gets a complete facelift and can almost be considered as an entirely new tool. It also becomes available in Flare, Flint, and Smoke, and in Smoke it also becomes available as a module in the new FX2 submenu that I mentioned earlier. It presents new controls, first of all, to have new blur types available. I'll just go into that very shortly. It also presents explicit color selections, color pots to determine what the color of your glow is. And it also presents blending modes here to control how your glow effects gets comped over your input image. Because the tool is very versatile, we've also added a bunch of presets just to get people started when they want to define specific effects. So this is kind of like the basic look that you would have in a glow when you first load the Glow node. But you will see that here, if I load another one of these presets, there, confirm, I get something that's quite different. You see here that actually right now it's using my input G-mask here. So I have this G-mask which is currently constraining my glow as it's being blended over, but of course I can change that at any point in time. So you see this is a very drastically different effect from the basic effect, but you can also do edge boosting. As you see here, it's creating an edge boost of my matte. This is something that you can use to your advantage in other situations. We have also a raise preset, and as you see, since we support radial and radial stamp, which is the new sample mode that I mentioned earlier in the blur upgrade, you can also hijack the Glow node to generate edge rays. And so there's just a bunch of different startup presets here that you may want to play with, and you will notice that when you load these presets, there's a note here that actually explains to you really how to best use that preset, and if it expects a matte, for example, and which parameters are actually going to be the most relevant to tweak the effect. Okay, so it's just to get you started. If you think that there are a bit too many parameters here and you feel a bit overwhelmed, well, the startup modes are just to help there. So as I said, the input matte can be used to constrain the glow to certain portions of the image, but it also contributes to the blending effect. And this is something that's actually key to understand, is if I have this incoming matte, I actually have separate controls over how the matte is then affected also by my glow node. And it's the result of this of these parameters that is then actually used to do the blending of the glow effect on top of my original image. So this is something that's really important to know, but of course you have full controls. And another thing to note is that if you have an incoming matte, in this case it is just a simple G mask, I actually have an auto matte capability that was already previously there, but the minute that I switch it on, you see that it actually gets combined to my input matte, much in the same spirit as what I showed you in the gradient. So this provides you with extra flexibility, and of course you have controls to invert or pre-multiply the matte. So the glow nodes should not be just taken as a pure eye candy tool. It can actually be used to solve a number of problems that are not necessarily very visual. And one example that perhaps I want to show you very quickly is how you can actually hijack the glow node to control edges of a key. So here I have this particular shot where I just put it through the master key, and let's say that I would want to kind of boost the highlights in the hair on the edges of the matte. Well, I can do that by piping both the matte, the comp, and the matte into the glow node, and by switching to one of the presets that I have, which we call Edge Boost. Okay, so you may think, oh, okay, well, nothing really happened, but in fact, something did, actually. I'm already configured here to do stuff which can actually be quite useful in the context of a key. The first thing is you see that if I tweak the intensity here, I can actually boost the edges, and I can actually decide what the color of the edges are going to be using the color pots here. So this can be actually quite a big help in solving certain blending issues that you may have. And the controls are flexible enough to not only determine how much you want the effect to grow inside of your comp, but also how soft the transition with the borders should be. Okay, and in this context here, obviously, I'm kind of blasting this side of the comp far too much. So I can combine this with a G mask. If you take a look, this is the G mask that I'm adding. So I'm kind of removing the edges on this side so that when I pipe it into the glow, at this point, this particular portion of the comp is going to be ignored by the edges that I'm expanding, and I'm only going to be correcting the intensity of this side of the comp. So again, it's a very flexible tool, and it's interesting to remember that you can use it to achieve extremely interesting eye candy type of effects, but it can extend significantly further into solving keying problems, look creations. There's a whole bunch of things there that you should want to investigate to use the glow node with. And that's a pretty high-level overview of the glow nodes, and that's about it.